really, what I'm talking about is stress relief, but, behind the scenes, it's business analysis. And business analysis needs to be done up front to have successful projects. And so, but, we talk about successful projects and the dollars, that are wasted by failed projects. But we sometimes forget about the soft side of it, the impact that failed projects have on people. So I thought what I would do is, frame this presentation about, user-related stress syndrome. Has anyone ever had difficulties with users? Have they ever told you they wanted something and you went ahead and did it, and then when you gave it to them, it was all wrong? I know, I think of my wife, when we first got married. I've been married now for about 22 years. And I guess I could consider her a user, and I'm the guy that has to do the stuff, right? So early on, she said, I want to paint, this bedroom blue. And so I went, in my youth, I ran out and got some blue paint, started painting it. She came home, and she gave me heck. That's not what I wanted, but it's blue. Now, you have to remember that my wife is a fine arts major. Okay, I'm an engineer type. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But I learned from it. I learned that, you just can't take what's out of a user's mind and, so easily just by their word. You have to invoke or use some tools and techniques to really understand what they want. Now, the learning experience involved a lot of pain, but I've learned over the years. And one of the things I learned that there's a lot of different blues out there. So when a user says they want something, you got to be pretty specific and clear. So now I'm a lot smarter. I say, okay, well, looking at the palette here, what number do you want? And is it eggshell or latex or whatever, oil-based? And I start to gather the requirements. Now, it's still not 100% right, because even though I prototype and paint a little bit on the wall, and that looks good, when I do the whole room sometimes, or a whole wall, it still doesn't work. But it certainly cut down a lot on the paint, okay, and the stress of not getting the requirements correct the first time. And so that's what I want to talk about. In everyday life, but certainly you're interested in, as a developer, in how it relates to IT. So let's start off with this little slide here. Has anyone seen this one before? Who's got it up on their wall at work? We got a lot of people here. When I looked at this, I said, well, okay, the customer came and explained what they wanted, right? So in this case here, let's assume the customer came and said, I want a swing for my 3 kids. They explained what they wanted, a swing for their 3 kids. And that's sort of, how it was explained. And the project leader understood that and said, well, 3 kids, they weigh a lot, so we better support it properly. And, so we'll do it like this. But then, obviously, the analyst realized that wouldn't work. So they had to support it another way, and the swing could still move back and forth. But then along came the programmer. The programmer said, well, that's still not going to work. It's not strong enough. There's 3 fat kids. Okay, so they put it on the big trunk, and it just sort of laid down, like that. And, well, it's deviating a bit from what the user needs. Now the consultant came in. I used to be a consultant. Okay, the consultant came in and said, well, we can't put these poor kids on a wooden plank. We've got to put them on something comfortable, and they did that. And on we go. The project was documented. The operations installed it. We didn't have enough time. The customer was billed, and as a consultant, it's nice to have steady billing, but they were billed like that. And it was supported, well, we just don't have the time to support it, let's just cut the thing down. And then finally, what the customer really needed was that. So the key is to find out this at the very beginning, to truly understand what the customer's needs are. And so, when we look at projects, there's an organization called the Standish Group. They do surveys. And they do surveys of organizations and They try to understand the projects, whether they're successful or not, or challenged. And so through the years, what we've seen is that failed projects have decreased, successful projects have increased, and successful meaning that, you know, they're done on time, they deliver the product that was intended, and they cost what was expected. So those three elements dictate whether it's successful or not. And then there are challenged ones, where we have cost overruns, time overruns, and missing features. And we've got a lot of problems there. It's improving, you know, the balance between failed and successful, but it's not entirely clearing up those challenged projects. If you look at the numbers, 53%, 49%, 51%, it's pretty steady, making good progress, but there are ways to improve it. One of the things the surveys found was that a lack of user input was one of the issues, you know, one of the main issues. Incomplete requirements and specifications, changing requirements and specs, lack of executive support, technology incompetence, lack of resources, unrealistic expectations, and unclear objectives. And it shows 35% at the top there, and those are what can be addressed by implementing good business analysis practice. You can reduce that. You know, so those main things can be corrected. You know, there are lots of areas that you can go wrong, but certainly at the very beginning, good solid analysis can help you have a better chance of succeeding. Now, in terms of where stress comes in, I thought I'd get two very representative people experiencing stress in this slide. But incomplete or misunderstood requirements lead to rework and restarts. From your perspective, you're downstream. I would suggest in some cases, and in other cases, you're responsible for gathering requirements and then going ahead and implementing it. Either way, there's stress when the requirements aren't defined or aren't understood correctly. And rework, I remember when I was, you know, a developer, I hated reworking things. It was such a waste of time. It just bothered me, and it created stress. And so, you know, certainly rework and restarts, they equate to dollars. Scope creep leads to time and cost overruns and makes people unhappy with their job. It doesn't make a very good work life when you're working 7 days a week, evenings, weekend, you know, the whole bit. And poor understanding of project complexity leads to insufficient budgets in the first place. So you don't have enough money to do everything you're supposed to do. So these are some of the main issues that come out of not gathering the requirements properly. Now, in terms of cost, you might have seen this. To correct something early on, you know, up front when you get into design requirements, if you miss something in the requirements phase and you're moving into, say, design, it costs you, you know, 10 times as much to fix it. As you move along, it'll cost you eventually 100 times as much if you miss that requirement and you've already implemented the system. And I guess, you know, these are stats from Barry Bain. But I mean, I've seen different stats. On average, I would say, you know, this is relative. This relates to commercial systems, you know, mission-critical commercial systems. It could cost 100 times as much to, you know, implement a requirement that was overlooked or correct something. If you look at other systems that affect human safety, like the control system at a nuclear plant or something like that, now you're not talking 100 times. You're talking thousands, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 times because of the additional oversight and review that has to go on. So it can be very expensive to overlook requirements.